Hey, so my name is Jade, and I don't know if I needed to say that or not, but I'm doing my presentation on the LGBTQ plus community and the police. And gays and the police have had a rocky relationship from the start. We are progressively getting better, and I think that's pretty noticeable. But just because we have made progress from the past doesn't mean that our fight is over and that we should just take this crumb and not a crumb. It's not a crumb. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just because we have gained some progress doesn't mean that we just take it and we're like, oh, this is perfect. We're all set. Thank you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we still have a lot of work to do, and this goes for minorities in general, but gays and the police are just a part of that. So it's shown in history all of the discrimination that these people had to go through. For example, back in the 1950s, socializing was really hard for transgender and gay people because wherever they would go, pretty much, they would be targeted, and they would be targeted by law enforcement as well. This also applies to in their own homes. Like, police officers would literally invade their homes just so that they could purposely catch them engaging in consensual activities that are consensual. Like, even though it's consensual, they're just like, nope, like, this is not allowed. The law enforcement would raid the gay bars, and they would target and they'd harass the community. Like, it's just ridiculous thinking about it. And people ended up being really tired of being discriminated just for living, just for simply existing and being who they were. So they decided to put up a fight. They were tired of just sitting quietly and hoping for fair treatment. Because clearly, sitting down and doing nothing doesn't do anything. The Stonewall riots happened, and we learned a lot about that in class 2. So during the Stonewall riots, minorities would continue to fight back. They would be shouting and chanting things like gay power, and they were chanting things like we shall overcome. And they knew that they deserved the same protection that anybody else would have outside of the community, rather than being put in harm's way by the people who were supposed to protect them. So thanks to the bravery of these citizens and their protests, they finally were able to rule certain laws against the community as unconstitutional. Like, it was illegal to be transgender or gay back then. And even the towns that we know to be extremely progressive in today's time, it was illegal there too. And you could tell that police were really anti-gay because they would try to entrap people of the community. Like, they would pretend to be gay themselves just to go find gay men, and then when they were together with the person, they would arrest them, like, for catching them in the act. But it's like, the measures that they took to just catch someone who's gay, to arrest them, no, I can't. Laverne Cox, which I'm sure many of you guys know if you know of her if you watched Orange is the New Black. She is amazing. And in an article that was assigned in class, she talked about her anger towards police officers and law enforcement who targeted transgender people. And what's crazy to me is that out of 74 of 85 transgender people who were murdered, the victims were identified by their dead names and dead genders. Even when they're dead, transgender people are disrespected. So as times have been changing, police forces have been more inclusive. They've been adding LGBTQ divisions, officers, committees, and they included those in order to protect individuals who were in the community who were also working in law enforcement. And even though they have those, the LGBTQ plus officers or people working in law enforcement still face discrimination. And there's a horrible story of Jay Brome. He was an officer at the California Highway Patrol. And in 2016, which was just 4 years ago, he experienced a lot of discrimination from his colleagues. Even in situations where he was under attack and he needed backup, they would not be there for him. They would just ignore his calls because, guess what? He was gay. The workplace became just as dangerous as the outside environment for him. What blows my mind the most was the fact that during the academy, one of his colleagues, they came up to him and they put a gun to his head and literally said, if I find out that you're gay, I will pull this trigger. So he faced death threats from his own people. And he filed numerous complaints, but nothing was done to protect him. Nothing was done to help him. And that's part of why we still have to fight for our rights, because nothing's being done in some situations and people are being overlooked constantly. So there's a nonprofit LGBTQ national organization called Lambda Legal, and in 2012 they conducted a national survey and they found that 14% have been assaulted verbally by police officers within the last 5 years. And 14%, you might think, oh, that's not a lot, because there's like still that many percent who never experienced that. But that's actually 332 people out of the 2,000. And still, you might think that that doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine yourself in a room full of 332 people. That's kind of a lot. Lambda Legal had placed lawsuits against police for their harassment. And according to analyzed data from 2016, Federal National Crime Victimization Survey, 300,000 crimes have possibly been committed against people in the U.S. simply due to their sexuality or gender identity. And that's just the reported amount. So if the LGBTQ community felt like they could count on the police and could count on reporting stuff like this, then those numbers would be very much higher. People are still afraid to report incidents to police. They feel like they're not going to be heard. They're not going to be taken seriously. But luckily, police officers are still being trained in order to better assist people of the community, because their goal is to build a solidified trust between them. So I read up on a case study, and in this case study, they developed strategies to help the LGBTQ community and how they should deal with minorities in order to make them feel safe enough to eventually report a crime if they ever happen. And in order to generate tactics, they used written surveys and they participated in group discussions, which was very beneficial because obviously if you have more people, you have more ideas going around. So like if in a case where a police officer would misgender a citizen, the appropriate response that they would then give is to not wave it off, but instead ask what their preferred pronouns are in order to show respect. And again, though we've come a long way from the past, we still have cases where the people that we're supposed to trust the most put us in harm's way. And people tend to think that we are grouping it as all police officers. All police officers discriminate citizens of the LGBTQ plus community, but that's not what we're saying. When we say that, we're clearly just talking about those who do. And even though it's not all of them, it still matters. So I think that law enforcement should continue to be trained on the matter because our rights are just as important as anybody else's.